What if the heaviest burdens you carry, the heartbreaks, the stress from work, the fears about the future, were never meant to be held forever? What if the secret to peace wasn't found in holding on tighter, but in learning the ancient art of letting go? This may sound simple, but simplicity has always carried the deepest wisdom. Across history, great civilizations wrestled with this same truth. In India, the Buddha taught Anicca, impermanence. He reminded his disciples that clinging to anything, whether joy or sorrow, is like trying to trap the wind in a jar. In Greece, Stoic philosophers like Epictetus echoed the same idea: you cannot control the world, only your response to it. Imagine that, a man born into slavery, teaching that freedom comes not from chains breaking, but from the mind releasing its grip. In Japan, samurai prepared for battle not by avoiding death, but by meditating on it. By letting go of the fear of dying, they discovered the courage to truly live. And in China, Daoist sages taught Wu Wei, effortless action, moving with the current of life instead of exhausting yourself swimming against it. Even the stars above reflect this wisdom. The moon waxes and wanes every month, reminding us that fullness and emptiness are not enemies, but partners in an eternal dance. Saturn demands discipline and shows us our limits, while Jupiter expands our vision, teaching that sometimes the greatest gift is the freedom to release what no longer fits. Pluto, the planet of transformation, brings endings that feel terrifying but always create space for rebirth. The cosmos itself seems to whisper, nothing stays, nothing clings, everything flows. History gives us vivid reminders too. During the American Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of letting go of hatred, insisting that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. In doing so, he turned an entire nation's pain into a movement of hope. Or consider Nelson Mandela, who after decades in prison chose not revenge but release, declaring that holding on to bitterness would only keep him imprisoned still. These leaders weren't weak for letting go, they were powerful because of it. Buddhist monks illustrate this truth in short, piercing lessons. One Zen story tells of two monks carrying a woman across a muddy road. Hours later, one monk was still upset, scolding the other for touching her. The second monk calmly said, "I set her down at the riverbank. Why are you still carrying her?" How many of us carry things long after they should have been released? Here on Dharma Veins, we will explore this forgotten practice not as an abstract philosophy, but as a lived art. You'll see how letting go clears the mind like clouds parting after a storm, how it softens the body into rest, and how it opens the soul to something larger than itself. You'll discover what sages, scientists, astrologers, and everyday people across cultures already knew, that true freedom is not in grasping, but in the courage to release. 1. The core problem. We live in a time when people carry too much. Disappointments in love, endless stress from work, and the constant fear of losing what we have pile up like invisible weights on our shoulders. Modern culture tells us that holding on is strength, that letting go means you failed. So we clutch tighter, to relationships that drain us, to jobs that hollow us out, to grudges that poison us from the inside. But the truth is simple: clinging doesn't protect us. It exhausts us. Holding on doesn't keep things safe. It makes the heart heavy and the mind clouded. Imagine gripping a handful of sand. The tighter your fist, the faster the grains slip through your fingers. Life is the same way. What we try to control most desperately often escapes us the quickest. Buddhism calls this tanha, craving, the thirst that never ends. The Buddha compared it to carrying a burning torch against the wind. The harder you cling, the more it scorches your own hand. You think you are protecting the flame, but in reality you are hurting yourself. In meditation halls, teachers often tell students to notice how thoughts rise and fall like clouds. When you cling to one, insisting, "This must stay," suffering begins. But when you let the cloud drift, the sky remains clear. Even in astrology, this truth plays out. Saturn represents responsibility and lessons. It teaches us structure, but when its influence turns heavy, we feel chained to expectations. Jupiter, on the other hand, expands and frees, urging us to release what no longer fits. A person stuck in Saturn's grip without Jupiter's balance lives in fear of losing control. But the cosmos whispers, cycles are constant. And no season stays forever. To hold summer in your hands when winter is due only brings sorrow. The stars remind us, letting go is not defeat, it is alignment with the universal rhythm. Think of familiar stories. In Greek mythology, King Midas wanted everything he touched to turn to gold. At first, it seemed like ultimate success. But when his food and even his daughter turned to gold, he realized the curse of holding on to desire. In a Zen parable, 2 monks carried a woman across a muddy road. Hours later, one monk still fumed. "Why did you touch her?" The other replied, "Brother, I put her down at the riverbank. Why are you still carrying her?" One carried a body for a moment, the other carried the weight of thought for miles. Which burden is heavier? In everyday life, we see it in relationships. A person clings to a partner long after love has faded, convinced that letting go is failure. Another hoards possessions, afraid that releasing them means losing identity. Some cling to anger, replaying insults years later as if the wound were fresh. Yet what is the result? Sleepless nights, anxiety, bodies that stiffen under the invisible load. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients already knew: unresolved attachment keeps the nervous system stuck in survival mode. Stress hormones flood the body not because of present danger, but because of old pain we refuse to release. Imagine you are walking through a forest carrying a backpack. At first it's light, but as you go, you keep stuffing in rocks, memories, grudges, fears, failed expectations. The weight builds until every step hurts. Someone beside you says, "Why not put it down?" But you shake your head, saying, "These rocks are mine. If I let them go, who will I be?" And so you suffer. This is the core problem. We confuse letting go with losing ourselves, when in truth it's the only way to find ourselves. Even folk wisdom knows this. Grandparents often say, "Don't sleep with anger in your heart." Farmers say, "A tree that bends survives the storm." Across cultures, the message repeats: rigidity breaks, softness endures. The Buddha's teaching, the Stoic's wisdom, the astrologer's chart, the grandmother's advice, all point to the same truth. We are drowning not because of life itself, but because of what we refuse to release. The core problem of modern suffering isn't just stress or heartbreak. It is the refusal to let go, the illusion that clinging equals safety. But like sand slipping from a tight fist, life moves regardless, and until we open the hand, we cannot receive the peace waiting to enter. To the historical journey. Across history, humanity has wrestled with the same truth: everything changes. And clinging to what must pass only deepens our suffering. In India, the Buddha taught Anicca, impermanence, as one of the 3 marks of existence. He told his disciples that every joy, every sorrow, every person we love will one day pass. Instead of treating this as tragedy, he saw it as liberation. A flower is beautiful because it fades. A child's first steps are precious because they never happen again. Yet human instinct is to hold on as if permanence were possible. The Buddha compared it to trying to clutch water in your hand. The tighter you grasp, the more it slips away. The Greeks, far across the sea, came to a similar realization through philosophy. Stoics like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius reminded their students, "You cannot control the turning of the world, only your response to it." Epictetus, born a slave, said freedom was not found in circumstances but in letting go of attachment to outcomes. To the modern ear, this may sound like surrender, but in practice it's strength. How often do we rage at the traffic light, curse the rain, or despair when plans fall apart? Stoicism teaches us what the Buddha taught centuries earlier: we suffer less when we release our grip on what we cannot command. In Japan, the way of the samurai embedded this wisdom into daily life. Warriors meditated on death before battle, not to become morbid, but to free themselves from fear. If you accept that life can end at any moment, then you fight without hesitation. You live without clinging. A samurai who has already let go of death cannot be conquered by terror. This mirrors a Zen koan where a monk was asked how to face fear. He replied, "Step into it, bow, and keep walking." By bowing to mortality, the samurai found peace in the very place most people resist. China carried its own current of wisdom through Daoist philosophy. Laozi described Wu Wei, action without forcing, moving with the current instead of against it. Imagine a river. You can thrash and fight, exhausting yourself, or you can flow with the water, letting it carry you toward the ocean. Taoism teaches that resistance creates pain, but harmony with the natural order brings ease. In daily life, this is as simple as accepting that seasons change, that children grow, that careers evolve. Trying to freeze a moment is like trying to dam the river with your hands. Even the stars tell the same story. Astrology reminds us that planets move in cycles, retrogrades, conjunctions, oppositions. Nothing is fixed. Saturn teaches us boundaries and discipline, but also the need to release control when the lesson is learned. Pluto, the planet of transformation, brings endings that often feel harsh, but always create space for rebirth. Look at the moon. Every month it swells to fullness and then diminishes. We don't curse the waning moon, we understand it as part of the rhythm. Our lives ask for the same grace, to see loss not as failure, but as the moon's natural return to darkness before the next rise. Folk traditions echo this in their own way. A farmer in the American Midwest knows he cannot cling to summer. He plants, he waters, he harvests, and then he lets the field rest. A Vietnamese grandmother might say, "Don't hold anger overnight, it hardens the heart." In African proverbs, there is wisdom that, the bird perched today may fly tomorrow. These simple sayings carry the same core teaching: you cannot keep what must leave. And peace comes from loosening your hold. When you look across these cultures, India's impermanence, Greece's stoic calm, Japan's fearless samurai, China's effortless Tao, the folk wisdom of grandmothers, even the silent testimony of the stars, the pattern is undeniable. Different languages, different gods, different rituals, yet all pointing to the same secret: letting go is not weakness. Letting go is the only path to peace. 3. The modern science. Modern science, in its own language, is now validating what sages and monks have whispered for centuries: the more we cling to what lies beyond our control, the more anxiety and depression we generate. Psychologists have measured this in countless studies. People who constantly try to micromanage outcomes, obsessing over whether others like them, whether markets rise or fall, whether a partner never leaves, report higher levels of chronic stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, lingers in their systems like smoke in a closed room. Over time, it wears down the immune system, clouds decision-making, and accelerates aging. Neuroscience has a name for the practice of letting go: cognitive reappraisal. This is the skill of reframing how we see events. Instead of labeling a job loss as the end, we can reinterpret it as the opening to something new. MRI scans show that when people practice reappraisal, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, quietly settles, while the prefrontal cortex, the center for reason and perspective, lights up. The brain literally rewires itself toward calm. Think about everyday life. A commuter stuck in traffic has two choices. One option is to cling, fume at the red lights, curse the slow cars, rehearse in your head how unfair it is. The result? A pounding heart, tight muscles, and a ruined evening before it begins. The other option is to breathe, release the illusion of control. Maybe turn on music or notice the sunset. Same traffic, different nervous system. This is letting go in practice. And science confirms it changes not just mood but biology. In Buddhism, monks have long used meditation to study this same process. A thought arises: anger, desire, fear. Instead of fighting it or following it, they label it, just anger, and let it dissolve. This is a living example of cognitive reappraisal before neuroscience coined the term. A Zen teacher once said, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." Science now tells us that learning to surf life's waves stabilizes heart rhythms, lowers blood pressure, and enhances resilience. Astrology adds another poetic layer. When Mercury retrogrades, people panic, blaming every misstep on the stars. But those who learn to let go of control see retrograde as an invitation: pause, review, reflect. Saturn transits may feel heavy, pressing us with responsibility, but they also force us to release what no longer serves. Science calls it adaptation, astrology calls it cycles, Buddhism calls it impermanence. Different languages, one truth: resisting the inevitable creates suffering. Embracing it builds resilience. Folk wisdom often reached the same conclusion without laboratories or charts. Farmers accept droughts and rains, understanding that worry won't summon clouds. You can't pull the shoots to make them grow, says a Chinese proverb. In the American South, elders say, "Let go and let God." These phrases aren't about passivity, they're about conserving energy for what we can truly influence. Psychologists echo this in what they call the locus of control. People with an internal locus, who focus on their own responses instead of external chaos, are healthier, happier, and longer lived. Even the body itself teaches us. When we cling emotionally, we also tighten physically. Shoulders hunch, jaws clench, stomachs knot. Letting go, by contrast, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. Breath deepens, heart rate steadies, muscles soften. A Harvard study found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice reduced measurable inflammation in the body. The Buddha would have smiled at this 2.5 millennia ago. He already taught that inner release brings outer healing. Imagine carrying a rope in a tug of war with life itself. The harder you pull, the more it burns your palms. The instant you let go, the pain ends, not because the rope changed, but because your relationship to it did. Science explains this in terms of stress hormones and neural pathways. Monks explain it in terms of craving and release. Both point to the same simple wisdom: clinging hurts, letting go heals. So while modern medicine often speaks of neurotransmitters and psychology speaks of reframing, the essential discovery is ancient. The body, the stars, the stories, and the scriptures converge on one message: when we loosen our grip on what we cannot command, our nervous system rests, our minds clear, and our spirits finally have room to breathe. 4. The 4 core principles. The art of letting go can feel abstract until we break it down into principles we can actually live. Across traditions, Buddhist, Stoic, Daoist, even the language of modern psychology, these 4 principles emerge again and again. They're not lofty ideas, they're practical steps that reshape the way we relate to the world. 1. Awareness. The first principle is simply recognizing the line between what belongs to you and what doesn't. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The Buddha taught the same: suffering arises when we cling to what is beyond us. In daily life, this is like standing in the rain. You can't stop the clouds from breaking, but you can choose whether to curse the storm or open an umbrella. Awareness means seeing clearly. The rain is not mine to control, but my reaction is. In astrology, Saturn represents these boundaries. Its lessons often feel heavy, like the discipline of a stern teacher, but they clarify the difference between fate and choice. Saturn doesn't ask us to control the universe, it asks us to master ourselves. 2. Releasing expectations. The second principle reminds us that happiness doesn't depend on everything going our way. Epictetus said it plainly: expect that things will not always happen as you wish, and you will be free. Buddhists illustrate this with the parable of a farmer who lost his horse. Neighbors cried, "Such bad luck," but days later the horse returned with a herd of wild horses. Now they said, "Such good luck." The farmer simply replied, "We'll see." The point is simple: outcomes are beyond prediction. The more rigid our expectations, the more fragile our peace. When Jupiter transits, astrologers speak of expansion, of blessings, but also warn against excess. Expecting the world to always deliver abundance can blind us to hidden lessons. True freedom is found when we meet life with curiosity instead of demands. 3. Practicing mindfulness. The third principle is presence. When we anchor ourselves in the now, fear of the future and regret of the past dissolve. Science shows that mindful awareness lowers cortisol and improves emotional regulation. But beyond science, mindfulness is the gate to peace. A Zen master once told a restless student, "When drinking tea, drink tea. When walking, walk. Above all, don't wobble." The humor hides deep wisdom. When we're present, we stop wobbling between what was and what might be. In astrology, the moon teaches this rhythm: waxing, waning, always changing. It reminds us that the only real moment is the one we are living. The moon doesn't rush to fullness nor cling to its glow, it simply reflects what is here now. 4. Compassion. The final principle reveals that letting go is not rejection but gentle release. Many people confuse letting go with pushing away in anger. But real release is rooted in love. In Buddhism, compassion, karuna, is inseparable from wisdom. To let someone go is to wish them peace, not curse them. Folk stories across cultures echo this. A grandmother might tell you, if you love a bird, open the cage. If it returns, it's yours. If not, it was never meant to be. Astrologically, Venus embodies this principle. Venus reminds us that connection is sweetest when it is free. Love that suffocates is not love, it is fear wearing love's mask. Together these four principles form a map. Awareness shows us the territory. Releasing expectations clears the road. Mindfulness keeps our feet steady. Compassion fills the journey with warmth. Without them, letting go feels impossible. With them, it becomes not just manageable but liberating. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with heedfulness." In modern terms, that means, recognize what you can't control. Drop rigid demands. Stay present. And move forward with love. That is the path to freedom. 5. The 10-step practice. The practice of letting go is not something that exists only in philosophy books or meditation halls. It's something we can embody, breath by breath, in the most ordinary moments. Here is a simple 10-step practice, almost like a ritual, that helps transform abstract wisdom into lived experience. Begin by sitting tall, your spine like a tree reaching for the sky. Close your eyes and take a slow, steady breath. This posture is more than comfort, it's symbolic. In Buddhist meditation, the upright spine is said to align the channels of energy, allowing insight to flow freely. In astrology, the spine is often likened to the axis of the world, our personal north and south pole connecting heaven and earth. Sitting straight places you at the center of this axis, grounded yet open. Now imagine you are holding something heavy in your hands. Maybe it is a recent disappointment, a grudge, or a fear about the future. For some, it might be a memory that refuses to fade. Picture it as a stone, cold, weighty, real. Folk traditions often use stones as symbols of burdens. In some native ceremonies, people write their worries on stones and leave them by the river. This imagery works because you can feel the weight immediately. As you inhale, feel the stone in your palms. As you exhale, imagine placing it gently on the ground before you. You don't throw it away with anger, you simply set it down with compassion. The way a weary traveler lays down a backpack. The Buddha once told the parable of a man struck by an arrow. Instead of pulling it out, the man obsessed over who shot it, what kind of wood the arrow was made of, and why it happened. The Buddha's teaching was clear: you cannot heal while holding on. You must release the arrow. Each exhale in this practice is a small act of pulling out the arrow. Repeat this process 10 times. With each breath, choose one burden to release. On the first exhale, maybe it's the harsh words someone spoke to you. On the second, the guilt you carry for a mistake years ago. On the third, the fear of tomorrow's unknown. By the time you reach the 10th breath, you will have laid down 10 invisible stones. It may not solve all your problems, but it shifts your relationship with them. You begin to see they are objects you can set aside, not permanent fixtures of your identity. Astrologically, this practice mirrors the cycle of the moon. Each breath out is a waning moon, letting go of light, making room for renewal. Each breath in is a waxing moon, drawing in calm and clarity. By the 10th cycle, you have lived a mini lunar month in your body. And just as no moon clings to its fullness, no human must cling to their burdens. The cosmos itself is teaching impermanence through rhythm. At the end of the 10th breath, let your hands rest empty in your lap. Notice the sensation of emptiness. For many, it feels like relief, a lightness in the chest. For others, it may feel strange, even vulnerable. This is natural. The mind has spent years equating holding on with safety. Emptiness feels like loss until you recognize it as freedom. In Zen, they call this mu, emptiness that is not barren but fertile. Like an open field ready for new growth. To bring this home, think of a farmer after harvest. The field looks empty, but in truth it is resting, gathering strength for the next planting. Your hands, once filled with burdens, now rest like that field, open, spacious. full of potential. Science affirms this too. When we visualize release, our nervous system actually calms. Our heart rate lowers. Our brain patterns shift into more coherent rhythms. What you imagine as a stone set down is reflected in your biology as stress hormones drop. The beauty of this 10-step practice is its simplicity. You don't need hours of training or a sacred temple. You can do it at your desk after a difficult meeting, in your car before walking into a tense family dinner, or at night before sleep. A minute of breathing, 10 small acts of release, and suddenly you are lighter. And in that moment of stillness, with empty hands and a quiet heart, you touch the essence of what sages across time have promised. Peace is not found in clutching harder but in learning to let go. 6. The benefits and experiences. When we begin to practice letting go, the first change often happens in the mind. Mental clarity emerges where once there was fog. People describe it as if a crowded room has suddenly emptied, leaving space to breathe. Thoughts that once loop endlessly, regrets about the past, obsessions over what someone said, fears of what tomorrow may bring, lose their grip. Neuroscience shows that rumination lights up the brain's stress circuits, keeping us trapped in cycles of worry. But the act of release quiets those circuits. In Buddhism, this is the gift of Anicca, impermanence. The moment we recognize that no thought lasts forever, the spell breaks. It's like watching clouds drift instead of believing the storm will never pass. Physically, the benefits are just as tangible. Muscles soften, jaws unclench, shoulders drop from their habitual tension. The parasympathetic nervous system, the body's rest and digest mode, switches on. People often report deeper sleep, the kind that feels like sinking into warm water. A grandmother might have said, "Sleep is the best doctor." But science confirms it. When the mind releases, cortisol levels drop, heart rhythms stabilize, and the body restores itself. The Buddha compared clinging to carrying a heavy load. The instant you set it down, your body feels lighter. That is not metaphor, it is biology. Spiritually, letting go opens a doorway to freedom. Many describe a sudden sense of spaciousness, as if they are no longer confined within their own skin. They feel connected to something vast, the flow of life itself. Daoists call it harmony with the Tao. Buddhists call it nirvana. Astrologers see it as aligning with the cosmic rhythm. In astrology, Neptune often symbolizes this dissolution of boundaries. When Neptune's energy is strong, we are invited to melt into something greater than the ego. It can feel disorienting at first, but once embraced, it becomes liberation, the drop realizing it is part of the ocean. Consider how this plays out in daily life. A person burdened by resentment toward an old friend finally chooses to forgive. The mind clears. That night, they sleep without the familiar knot in the chest. Days later, they notice laughter comes easier. Their patience with others has grown. What changed? The world outside is the same, what shifted is the inner landscape. This mirrors a Zen saying, "The obstacle is not the mountain, but the stone in your shoe." Letting go is removing that stone. The mountain remains, but the journey is lighter. Even folk stories carry this truth. In one tale, a man carried 2 buckets, one perfect, the other cracked. The cracked bucket wept for being broken, until the man pointed to the flowers blooming along the path watered by its leaks. The bucket realized its flaw had been a gift all along. Spiritually, letting go means releasing the need to be perfect, to control outcomes, to hold ourselves or others to impossible standards. In that release, beauty grows in places we never expected. Astrology reminds us that cycles themselves teach release. The waning moon invites rest. Pluto transits demand transformation, tearing down old structures to make space for rebirth. These cosmic lessons mirror our personal ones. Just as no star holds its light forever, no human can hold every attachment. Freedom is found in rhythm, not resistance. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this practice is that it costs nothing. It requires no equipment, no journey to distant temples, no advanced degree. From the moment you were born, you carried this capacity within you, the ability to open your hand, unclench your mind, and place the stone down. The Buddha once said, "You can only lose what you cling to." Science, philosophy, astrology, and folklore all converge here. Letting go is not a luxury. It is our birthright. When you experience the mental clarity, the physical ease, and the spiritual connection that come from release, you realize that peace was never hidden far away. It was waiting in the simple act of loosening your grip. And now, it's your turn to live this wisdom. Join the number 7 day letting go challenge. Each day, release one burden that has been weighing on you. It could be a grudge, a regret, or even a fear about tomorrow. Write it down, breathe it out, and let it go. Comment, Day 1 released, below. And I'll pin a free guide to keep you supported on this journey. If you found this practice meaningful, subscribe to Dharma Veins. Next week, I'll share a 10-minute guided meditation on the art of letting go along with a deeper technique drawn directly from Buddhist tradition, something passed down for centuries but often forgotten today. Folded hands, and before we close, let us offer a prayer. May all beings, especially those enduring the pain of natural disasters, war, and great loss, find peace in every breath and comfort in the simple act of release. May suffering soften, and may compassion embrace the world. Now I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you feel ready to release this week? How do you imagine your life might shift once you set it down? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may be the light that inspires someone else to begin.